Hey everybody, off the top rope here, off the Mike Sports Network. So I've been getting a little bit of heat, because I'm now starting to call it down the middle. People think that I've hated AEW, and you know, I've kind of praised WWE, but on Friday I was very critical because WWE and specifically SmackDown has not been good, and the build to WrestleMania has not been good. But one thing I will say, and I'm calling this completely fair, because we saw it this week on display as much as anything. Story over spots. Story over spots. Viral moments mean so much more when there's a story to it rather than just doing crazy shit just for the sake of doing crazy shit. One of the biggest reasons why I've been consistently critical of AEW in the last year, 2 years, is their inability to tell a story and their inability to go to their audience and basically say, hey, this is happening because of X, Y, and Z. And it's gotten lazy. It's gotten, pretty predictable. And there was no point evident. I've talked about it extensively that nail 2x4 spot with Spike going through John Moxley's back. Like I've talked about it extensively. Listen, everybody thinks that I'm against violence. I am not against violence. If it means something, then I'm fine. Like, I didn't like some of the stuff that they did in the cage with Swerve Strickland and Hangman Adam Page because, the feud warranted it. Did I think they went a little too far? Yes. But still, at least there was a story there. What the hell is the story here other than to pop the audience? Like, listen, that's why a lot of people have gone away from AEW. And if there's one thing that I can be critical with about WWE is their stories sometimes can be mundane, but they don't go, but just because their stories aren't clicking doesn't mean they go to take unnecessary risks to get the audience to give them a reaction. I understand that AEW is an alternative. I get it, that they go to more gratuitous violence and they get a little bit more gory and a little bit more graphic. Does it get a little bit too indie-rific for me? Yes. But I prefer stories over spots. I will always prefer stories over spots because at least if you're telling a story and then the spot means something, then that is way better than whatever the fuck this was on Wednesday with, the John Moxley and, Cope match. It's like, first of all, the match didn't need to happen. And, what's the story there? What are they fighting over? It's like, okay, yeah, Cope wanted to end the Death Riders, but yeah, he couldn't do it at the pay-per-view. So they're just running the match back and just doing a bunch of crazy shit because both these guys are batshit insane. That's not a story. Like, I'll give you guys a comparison. Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, or even going further back, CM Punk, Drew McIntyre, both in hardcore level stipulation matches. And they did crazy stuff. One of them used a barbed wire chair with real barbed wire. I have been verified that from multiple people, the multiple reliable people in the industry who covered this shit say that was real barbed wire that they used in that match. There was a real toolbox that was used that busted open Drew McIntyre hard way in the Hell in a Cell match. When you do stuff like that, and there is a story attached to it, and it's not just on a random Wednesday night in front of almost nobody in a blizzard, you're going to get more meaning. And that's my biggest critique of AEW. Are some of these spots, some of the extreme things kind of cool and, kind of different? Yeah. But the reason why I bag on AEW and I've gotten so hard on this company for what they've done is because they've taken the easy way out. And they've sided on the side of hey, let's play it. We're not playing it safe. We're going to go all out and do this in the name of a pop rather than, hey, maybe telling a story. And it could mean 10 times more than us doing it in a random spot in the middle of nowhere in a nothing match that means nothing when we know the result of it. Like, guys, you don't remember that spot because, hey, it was an intriguing part of the story. You remember the spot because John Moxley had freaking nails in his back. That's not how you're supposed to do things in wrestling. That's just cheap pops. That's cheap reaction. And that's not how this is supposed to work. And that's why I'm always critical, because here's the other thing. I know that this place can do better because I saw it for the first 2 or 3 years of this company. And I give Tony Khan and also some of the people there credit because they were genuinely interesting. It also didn't help It also helped them that WWE was at one of its lowest points in its creative existence under Vince McMahon. But now they're getting exposed because hey, nothing that they're doing is working, and they're resorting to cheap tactics to pop their audience, like the stunt that they did in this match. Like I said, you can go back to the stuff that I had kind of a problem with the Hangman and Swerve stuff. Like I had a problem with that, but at least the story lent itself. These guys wanted to kill each other. Hell, Hangman kayfabe burned down Swerve's house. Like these guys have been feuding with each other for a year, so of course they were going to go to extreme lengths to do stuff. Did I think it was necessary to get the point across? No, but at least the story led itself to that. There was no story here. This was just crazy people doing crazy shit for just unknown reasons, and it didn't lead to anything. Cope lost, and so what? We're moving on. And you would have been better served telling a story of like, hey, how can Swerve Strickland potentially conquer the Death Riders and win the title at Dynasty, rather than doing this match and doing that spot for no reason other than to gross half of your fan base out and start this tribalistic feud in the fan base, which just I don't like. And this is the stuff that has really driven me crazy about the fan base in AEW, and also just like the fan base in wrestling worlds in general, because we're just arguing about stuff. But in my opinion, if you're going to do something on an episodic television show from week to week and make something compelling, don't do spots, because that's not going to be like, people are going to forget about that. They're only going to remember like the graphic nature of it. They're not going to remember who won the match. They're not going to remember all the other shit. That's not how it should be. You should be able to remember these matches and these moments because hey, you told a compelling story and you were able to like get from A to B and make it make sense. And AEW has just lost the sight of their basics in the last like 2 to 3 years, because they just want to pop their audience and they just want to do cheap shit. And that's fine if you want to do that in like GCW that really doesn't have a mainstream television contract, but if you're doing this on weekly television, like that's not how it's supposed to go. Like save these moments for like special times, like pay-per-views. And like if you have a meaningful like stipulation and you've been telling a long running like deep story for months, and some people will say, well, they've been telling the Death Riders Cope thing since January. I was like, yeah, it still sucks, and they did this rematch just because the first match sucked. So that doesn't mean you have to do it. So again, I say it, stories over spots. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.